into sort of political education classes. So while we were performing, we would do things like turn a song that we'd written that was, 3 minutes long, and turn it into a long-ass song and just actually talk about things, talk about all kinds of political things, but within the context while the music is still playing and while you're still kind of, so you don't, kind of bore people. But so there's another thing we did. We also, because we were doing a lot of shows for one cause or another, and we did a show one time in Vieques in Puerto Rico, and that was when the US Navy was there, and they used to use it as a bombing zone. So the cancer rate was, twice as high as the rest of Puerto Rico, and the cancer rate in Puerto Rico is really high. Anyway, we performed there. When we came back to New York, and we were doing shows, and we had a lot of people asking us, I heard you went to Puerto Rico, and so we would talk to them about what was going on in Vieques. And while we had been there, we had videotaped people talking about, what's going on with them. And so we got the idea to make it into a video, into a little documentary. So we had ourselves performing, but then the bulk of it was these interviews that we did with these people. So anytime anybody asked us, what were you there for? We would give them the DVD and say, check it out. This is what we were there for. Another thing we did is we used to do graffiti, which is, the nature of graffiti that's supposed to be illegal. And, but in the beginning we used to put up our tag. I used to put 0 everywhere, and I was getting all kinds of fame. But eventually we realized that the thing to do was to start putting up murals of the things we wanted to talk about. So we started putting up murals of political people, and we would put quotes to make sure that you knew who that person was and you knew what they said. So we would find the best quotes that somebody like Huey Newton said, and that's what we put up. And while we were painting, people would come up, and we were doing this like 3 in the morning because it was illegal. And people would come up and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? And you wanted to talk to them, but the minute you talk to them, it's like, whoop, whoop, there's the police, and you're fucked. So initially we made little cards that would explain the mural and explain who we were doing the mural of, and we would just hand them out. And, but even then, people still want to talk, So what we decided to do, we picked a Saturday, and we picked a wall, and we went out there, and we invited the older cats to bring their congas, and we invited, the grandmothers and stuff to sell cuchifritos and stuff on the street. And then we started whitewashing the wall. We had about 100 people out there hanging out, and we invited people to participate in making the painting. And the cops drove by. They drove by about 5 times. And then they were like, okay, we don't want to cause an incident. There's a bunch of folks out here. And so it worked. So not only did we get up with our art and with our message, but we also had the other message, which was that if we're united, the streets are ours. So stuff like that really worked for us, and we continue to do it to this day. One of the things too is that we made it a point never to get permits for anything. And it's gotten I'm kind of refreshed by Ferguson and Baltimore, because it was getting to the point where everybody was getting permits for everything. You were gonna have a march with 5 people, and you're going to the police precinct to get a permit. So we made it a point, that by a rule, if you wanted to be down with us, you don't get permits. You don't even talk about permits. So the things like that made people realize, if you're united, you're running things, and we found ways to feed ourselves, and so we didn't necessarily have to have a job from somebody. From somebody else. Another thing I just wanted to touch on real quick is that by 1981, hip hop is totally co-opted. And that's interesting because it's like around the early 80s that all these nonprofit organizations started being created. I was listening to a speech by H. Rap Brown, and he was saying, brother, you need a job, we got a job for you with the Black Panther Party. And I was thinking about that. I was like, wow, we really couldn't say that today. It's like, you got a job, we got a job for, and you go to a nonprofit. So, the average person is going to go to a nonprofit organization because the nonprofit is going to pay them. And so, we're no longer living in the time where people are doing grassroots or dirt roots things anymore, because now there's a nonprofit for everything that ails you. And I think that's one of the things that has killed the movement, in my opinion. You know, so I think that's something we gotta think about and we gotta rectify. You know, and, you know, that's with the understanding though, that's like, one of the things in New York too is that the squatters movement, before it was called the movement, was basically Puerto Ricans and black folks who needed a place to stay. But by the 80s, suddenly it was being called the movement because then it was white folks. You know, and the interesting thing is that, you know, unless you were seriously on the down low with your squatting as a black or Puerto Rican folks, you know, you didn't last in there. The cops were in there in a second. But they gave white folks all kinds of leeway. And today, there's a bunch of squats in the Lower East Side in New York that are owned by the former squatters. But they're pretty much almost all white people. Meanwhile, all the squats that were opened up by Puerto Ricans and black folks, you know, 10, 15 years before that, don't exist anymore. You know, so we do understand that the treatment is different, you know, based on privilege, you know, and you know, so we understand this, but there's still a need for us to start thinking outside the box, and you know, just really rip ourselves free from the whole corporate thing, you know, and rip ourselves free from the whole capitalist thing to the best of our ability. And you know, it's not easy, but the problem is, until we do, we're just gonna kind of keep going in circles. You know, and that's the bottom line. We're gonna go in circles until, you know, it's like the Zapatistas were smart because they didn't say they were gonna overthrow the Mexican government. They said they were gonna create their own autonomous, you know, indigenous communities. And they still exist today for that reason. And I think it's difficult, it's a little more difficult for us though, because as, you know, as African Americans and as Puerto Ricans, we are basically the native sons and daughters of this system because we're the people that were brought here and we're the people that are still currently colonies and internal colonies. Same thing with Native American folks. And so it's a little more difficult because you know, black nationalists talked about carving out an area here, you know, as a black nation, which is like, you know, a hard sell. You know, that's a serious struggle. But I kind of think as a people, we need to start talking about creating autonomous communities where we can actually say, you know, police are not welcome in this community. You know, and the way, you know, if they say they're coming in, we find ways to keep them out. You know, and I don't think that we're talking about that yet. And a few years back when they started gentrifying Harlem, you know, and I went to one of these anti-gentrification meetings, and I basically said something like, well, you know, if you want to get rid of, you know, gentrification, and you see anybody that looks like they don't belong, shoot them in the head. You know, they said, oh, you're fucked up, you're fucked up. And I was like, oh, wait, okay, then at least get some eggs and throw eggs at them. But they didn't even want to do that. And I said, well, you know what, you don't want to stop gentrification. And that was about 10 years ago. You walk around Harlem now, you know, you don't know you're in Harlem. You know, and that's the reality of the situation. So I really do think we have to start thinking of our communities as autonomous communities. You know, and we have to start thinking about our cultures as autonomous cultures. And to me, there was and there still is so much promise for hip hop, but only if we start looking at it as legitimately our culture that we're going to take back. You know, and we start looking at people who sell in as being, you know, tantamount to the enemy. Because if somebody's selling into the system, you know, we have no use for them. You know, on another note, I was at this gallery a few months ago, and they had all these photographs from the 70s of folks who were involved in trying to get the Puerto Rican political prisoners out. And I'm looking at all these old photographs, and there was one of a concert in Madison Square Garden, and they had all the huge superstars of salsa from the time, and it was packed house. So I'm looking at this picture, and this woman behind me, she says, "Oh yeah, I was there. It was amazing." She was like, "Oh, you know, Willie Colon was playing and Eddie Palmieri." And she mentions every, you know, big salsa act from that time, and they were there for a concert, a fundraiser to free political prisoners who shot up the U.S. House of Congress and who tried to assassinate Harry Truman, the President of the United States, in the 50s. And that's what they were in prison for. And I said to her, you know, how did you get those, you know, big superstars to do that, you know? And she said, well, you know, they were all from the Bronx and Harlem and Puerto Rico. And we told them, yo, you gonna do this. You're either gonna give us money or you're gonna perform a fundraiser. And none of those artists felt like they could say no. Today, you know, we don't even feel like we can ask Jay-Z to give up the loot, you know? And Jay-Z says that his presence is enough, you know? And it's like, no, it's not enough. Give up the loot. I was